Well, today on the Non-League Radio Show, we don't just have one or two guests for the first time. I have three guests here from Baltimore City Football Club. We have Nick, Ben, and Joe. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Not a problem.
Thanks for having us, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem. And it was a good surprise to find out that two of you are from the northeast of England, which is excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Home away from home, so happy to be on.
Right, so we'll just start. If you could just introduce yourselves, your role, a little brief thing about your role at the club, and then we'll move on to some more questions about each of you individually.
Yes, smashing. I'll go first. So I'm Joe. I'm from Huddersfield originally. I actually came over to the States after I got released from my academy when I was 18 in the UK. Came over on a scholarship and just haven't really wanted to leave since I've been here. Always kind of continued with football, post-college, playing professionally, coaching professionally, and came to Baltimore on a job opportunity and kind of bumped into Nick and the whole idea of, hey, we could start a team and something really special in Baltimore was, what kind of got us here today. And actually really excited to be talking to you guys and kind of promote the team and get out there a little bit as well. But for the team, I'll be coaching this team and hopefully looking to bring some W's early doors to Baltimore.
Good stuff. Who wants to go next?
Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, so I originally, like Joe, from the northeast of England originally, just slightly further south than you, Steve, a little town called Burbridge. I left again very similarly to Joe when I was about 18. Came over originally, obviously start to play college, then got into coaching after college. So yeah, really just wanted to keep going within the game, going with the sport. And then found that there's quite a niche market with regards to setting up a semi-pro club, men's football, women's football. It's not really been established, especially in the city of Baltimore. So really wanted to put that project and send that forward. Ultimately, couldn't do it for about a year and a half. Was really struggling. And one day met Nick on Facebook. I think we jumped on a call for about 5 minutes. Established that we are very aligned and similar with what we wanted to do, and ended up here. So yeah, then my role in the club is director of football, so managing and overseeing the technical aspect and the management of on the with regards to the development of the club and what we want to do on the field. So my role is really to support Joe, obviously, with this first team that we've started. And obviously to continue to work along with Nick to make this project as special as it can be within the city of Baltimore.
Great stuff. And Nick?
Sure thing. I also moved to the States when I was 18 from Germany, albeit my playing days were a lot shorter, and I focused just a little bit more on my studies at the time. Played for a little bit in Puerto Rico as it happened, took a step back in Germany really shortly, and then right before the pandemic landed in Baltimore again. And more or less kept on playing recreationally, but got to know the city very intimately. Got to meet a lot of folks who have been involved in past projects when it comes to football in Baltimore. Learned a lot and recognized certain patterns and things that kept popping up. And over beers, over coffee, over, late nights just doing some digging, realized there's a blueprint here of how to do it correctly once and for all. This is a sports mad city. And indeed, it's a soccer mad city. I think you'll find more pubs here in Baltimore playing a Premier League game over the weekend than you might actually find them playing anything else. And I mean that. So there's certainly fandom here. You walk around and you speak and you see that there's a real opportunity here. And for that, I'm going to be taking the lead roles as directing manager when it comes to comms, when it comes to the direction of the club, how it will operate, a lot of logistics, a lot of the boring stuff off the field. But I'll also be assisting Ben and Joe on some of the footballing aspects, but really I'm taking a very hands-off approach there.
Great stuff. It's exciting for me to speak to people who are putting the club together from the start and ask some questions I can't ask other people. You touched on, I think Ben touched on a little bit, but how did the whole project come together?
Well, Ben did mention that we had two plans that looked surprisingly similar. And I suppose on my end, back in July, August, through professional connections, I met with, I did meet him, spoke with a fellow who was part of a telecoms telecom company, mobile telecom company that was really thinking about breaking into the US market. Long story short, that didn't happen. Pandemic, economies, and inflation curtailed those ideas, but a lot of groundwork was done, a lot of relationships with the city, a lot of first discussions were had with academies here in the area. But, all of these were put on pause for a moment, but it's an itch that couldn't be scratched. And some colleagues of mine told me, instead of having one major sponsor push, try to see if you can get community support, which is honestly the better way to do it here as well. And so I just kept pushing on with that. We had a lot of promising conversations that ended abruptly, and throughout this call, you'll see why. But slowly but surely, things started to fall into place. I brought Joe on, talked to him. He had some of the same thoughts and opinions as I did. Some of the vision was also similar. And then I spoke to Ben on Facebook, and that's where it really took a new step. It was like, okay, there's a lot of, not only have I done a lot of legwork, but Ben had done a legwork as well. And the three of us put our heads together and we launched this, and it has taken quite a bit of a life on its own. And we're all very excited. There's a lot of buzz every single day.
So when you're getting involved setting this up, have you already got your mind on facilities, maybe places you're going to play, funding? You've touched on that as well, and players as well. That's obviously the important thing. You need players through the on the pitch. So I'm guessing a lot of this is in the planning.
Yes, and so begins the story. Well, let me tell you about a small town called Baltimore. Things are very odd here. They are very much, it's a different dimension. It's a different planet. We had basically an agreement going into the Christmas break that a pretty unused field, really little stadium it used to be, was going to be redeveloped, revamped, and we were going to join a division much higher than what we are in right now. You'll realize soon why this is a silver lining. Essentially, there was a lot of staff movement, and our permit application, everything kind of just vanished, as they do sometimes here. My wife is a paralegal, and she was not surprised. And it was far too soon to the beginning of the season for us to reignite that initiative. And at this point, the field is dangerous to play on. It's just, you cannot, I wouldn't play on this. Nobody should be playing on it, despite people that do. Fortunately, Ben was able to make some moves happen, and we joined a lower division, which is a state division called the Maryland Major Soccer League. They were very receptive to us joining on board. And we still are going to we have a field, we have a little stadium that we're going to call home. We're going to try to use that platform, which does have quite a bit of an audience, to try to generate some buzz, We already have a brewery that is willing to, the owner is a crazy man and is willing to join in onto an untested club as the main sponsor. There's some other conversations ongoing. And this may have actually been the better way to do it. Instead of just jumping headfirst into a higher division with a higher, risk reward, we're going to do a slow burn, which is starting to already burn brighter before we have even played our first game.
I want to quickly speak to Joe because I know Joe has to go earlier. So we'll come back to what you've been talking about there, Nick. But I just want to speak to Joe about your day-to-day role of what you're doing as manager. I guess it's different at the minute because you're starting out, you're doing tryouts. But I'm just trying to get an idea of what your role is going to be on a daily basis.
So more so understand from the perspective of managing the team on game days, making sure that we're getting the most out of the players, working obviously with Bennett during practices to make sure that we're aligned in what we're trying to do and how we're trying to play the game, but also, how we want to teach the game to these lads as well. So more of the back end in terms of training, my priority there is obviously to assist with Ben, and we're going to help each other. And then game day decisions, starting 11. And then obviously, I think a role for all of us is always going to be player recruitment and bringing in, finding talent to come in and make a difference. But, for sure, we'll be working really heavily on that aspect as well.
I know it's early days, but what's your sort of aims and objectives for the season? Is it just to try and get yourselves established, get a team playing well, and then just take it from there?
Those are honestly that's kind of the baseline goals that I think that we all really share. Nick and I, from being in this soccer community here in Baltimore for a few years, like Nick said, we've made some really great connections. We've got a lot of really good players who are excited about coming and playing with us. So from a perspective of, starting well and playing good football, I think that's a goal that we can achieve fairly quickly. Obviously, we need a little bit of time for the players to settle and play together, which is understandable. But I think with the way that we've all seen the city adopt football or soccer and how it's grown, there's a lot of talented players out here which we think we can put a team together that will represent the city really well. So, like Nick said, there's amples of bars and pubs and this, organizations here which are solely focused around football. On Sunday, I walked down to Starbucks to grab a cup of tea, and there's 40 people outside of a bar there called Abbey Burger, which is an Arsenal bar. They were rocking up to watch Arsenal spank Crystal Palace, and they're there at 9:15. They're there at 9:30. There's these little pockets of community, which I think if we do what Baltimore does really well in terms of it's very community based, it's very neighborly. I think if we approach organizations and bars like Abbey Burger and the Arsenal community there, then we can do really well with getting that traction and that following, going in the right direction quickly. And, there's also a lot of really good stuff, just in Baltimore itself, right? The National Aquarium's here, very historic places like Fed Hill Park and Fort McHenry. There's a lot of culture and heritage here. So I think if we can help capture some of that excitement, that's just naturally here in the city, then it'll help us get off on the right foot.
Great stuff. And I noticed you had some tryouts yesterday, and you've got some on the 26th. How do they work? Do you have? I don't know what the numbers were. Obviously, you might have to trim those numbers down. What sort of squad level can you have for the season, and are you confident you're going to get that many players in?
So we want to do, we want to have a solid 16, 17 players. We're in talks right now of actually, if we can get the numbers, which I think that we will, of fielding a second team. So then we've got an environment in which we can help players develop, and obviously they can drive competition for first place spots. We had great numbers yesterday at the turnout. There was some great quality there, which was fantastic to see. I think next week we'll get even more numbers, which is good. But I think, you know, the way that they kind of played out yesterday, numbers were great. The quality was high. I think we can raise the bar a little bit on that next week. And we can get those numbers. You know, I'm really, really, really confident that we can get, you know, 25, 26 players, you know, excited about what we're trying to build here and the foundations that we're putting into place. And being a part of that as well, I think is important, right? You know, being a part of something that's brand new and something that we want to build on for, you know, for as long as we're here, because there's a reason why we're all football fans. We love the sport. It's played a big part in all of our lives. You know, I think, you know, we want to be able to pass that along.
Can I add a little comment there on what Joe said?
Yeah.
Maryland is a state that can really boast some great names and great academies and great clubs of a variety of different levels when it comes to the talent. It's just natural here, whether it's the children of recent migrants or long-standing soccer families in Maryland. Maryland always produces great talent. And yesterday,
The great catchment area.
yeah, it's a catchment area that doesn't have really, no one really has a stronghold on it. California, you know, there's professional teams in California. DC United is not far from here, but really their focus is on Northern Virginia. New York is New York. Seattle has the entire Pacific Northwest, essentially. Maryland remains a little bit of a gold rush, Wild West spot when it comes to, there's a lot of gems here, but there's not really an established club here that determines on making this the most locally supported in terms of on the field and off the field success. And last night, just talking with some players, some of them had been here for a while, they said that that was some of the best play, even if it was a drill, small fielded games, or the very big one at the very end, some of the best play that they've had in years. So we picked up on our first day some really good quality that really, there's every reason to be optimistic.
Great stuff. Well, thanks, Joe, for that. I'm going to move on to Ben now and about the role of director of football and what that involves.
Yeah, so
no problem, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so what I'd say is, in terms of obviously the role of director of football, I mean, I think that a lot of times it can get quite conflated or overcomplicated, but really my role is to support and integrate the development of football generally on the field, in practice, in terms of the structure. And I think a good way of describing it is simply as what we do on the field and how we do it is my role. That is something that I'm very excited about. And the reason that me and Nick obviously started having the conversation that we did was that I said to Nick right away, look, my background, you know, is within football development, within coach development, you know, with player development. I can do all those things. However, what I quickly realized, you know, obviously working in this industry now for the better part of, you know, coming up on 9 years, if you don't have a good infrastructure off the field, so, you know, to Nick's point, the management, the organization, the structure, the communications, the finance, you know, we talked about logistics and field space. These things are crucial to allow football to be delivered. So my goal and objective with, you know, the club, it's the same as Nick's, it's the same as Joe's, is to deliver, you know, a football club for the city of Baltimore, but to be really strategic on how we implement, the level that we're playing at, how we implement player development, so developing youth teams, which obviously will be, in the upcoming and following years, a women's program, which is something we're going to launch in the summer as well. But without the help of Nick, without the help of Joe to be able to deliver that, I'm just a person on an island. So having the support around it to be able to deliver it, I think is vital. But, to answer your question, Steve, in terms of what my role is, it is to structure and design, how we will execute playing football at every level. That's something I've been wanting to do this literally for years now. I'm obviously very grateful to Nick and to Joe to allow this to be delivered. But yeah, it's very exciting. And my role, I think, is really exciting as it is to be able to fulfill that.
No, it does sound very exciting, to be honest. And you mentioned the Maryland Major Soccer League before. How do you actually apply to join a league? Have you got to have certain things in place? Or is there like a ballot of teams? Or if you can explain maybe Nick, how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I can let Nick jump in on this as well, but I think with it obviously being an amateur men's league team or amateur semi-pro team, there are checks and balances for what you can and cannot do. As far as the player registration goes and the team registration, it's pretty simple, but abiding by the league structure and their bylaws, I mean, that's something that myself and Nick sat on a call on last week. To me, with the league, it seems it's a league that's been around for a long time. I think it's the better part of 15 years. Going on to, Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the league in itself has got quite a storied history. And we're obviously very excited to be a part of it. We, have I'd say a good relationship with the commissioner. He was happy to have us in as well. So for us, it's exciting.
So
I don't really.
Yeah, sorry, Nick.
I don't really have much more to ask or add to that. Yes, it has been around. It's actually taken it's not 15. It's 50 years, even longer. Wow. Previously, it's just gone through a variety of different names, but generally speaking, in its current status, it's been around since 1969. But it can trace its roots back to just after World War I. That's not an exaggeration. And for what that's worth, that's actually a fairly young timeline for football on the East Coast of the U.S. New York State and New York City have a league that's even longer, but Maryland is one of the longest ones around.
So going back to Ben, comparing it to the league to, say, the English tier system, whereabouts would it fit?
That's a really good question. It's really tough. It's really tough to say. I played in the Northern Counties Eastern League in England for a club called Selby Town, actually, and that was a very good standard of football. To Nick's point, to Joe's point, in terms of stars in the rough and talented players, these leagues, I would say, are full of them. There's really talented players. The level of ability of the individual is good. So the biggest difference is that on a team level and structural level, it's not as organized because you don't have the people that are most involved, with delivering a club for the community. So the example in England would be like the Selby Town one I mentioned there. That they have a really history community within football. They're a very proud town around football. So I'd say there's a lot more pressure to deliver on that. So usually the quality and ability of the management and the staff and the structure is a little bit better, opposed to kind of where we're at. Amateur league status is something that is really picking up and kicking off over here in the States, but it's not quite as, I would say, serious as what non-league teams are in England and in the UK. But having said that, it's funny. I was going to say this to Nick the other day. But there's a team called Alexandria Reds who played the Maryland Bobcats, which is an actual pro team. This is probably a good comparison of where things lie in a preseason game, albeit. But Alexandria Reds, I mean, they're amateur status like us. We're amateur status. And they played a pro team and beat them 1-0 in a preseason friendly. So, I mean, that really shows you the levels and abilities and the comparison. So I wouldn't say that, it's miles off amateur status in the UK in terms of semi-pro leagues. But, it's competitive, but maybe not on that level of organisation.
And do the players, I'm just trying to think of forward questions here as well. So are the players contracted to you, or are they free to move between teams, or when they sign up for you for the season? And I'm leading on to my second question. Say you have a gem or a star in your team, and they're like in England, someone would come in and sign those players. Could that happen with yourselves, or are they not? Is it not contracted the same way?
Well, I would say we're not going to give too much away, but they can move freely. But I think some of the conversations that we've had is, we'd like to formalise and, although it's semi-pro or amateur state, we would like to maybe professionalise it a little bit more so we have the commitment to the players. But I'll keep my mouth shut on that one, and Nick, you can jump in.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm just going to say thank you because I'm going to jump off, guys. But appreciate you having us on the show, Stephen. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Right. The only thing I would add to that is really there is at this level no reason why we can't keep a player from going to another team in a different league. That's key. And, from Monday to Friday, technically speaking, none of the teams in the Maryland Major League can tell them not to play on their buddy's team who has a pub team on Thursday or Friday night. Yeah. We are going to have a code that we're going to have our players sign that is going to say, listen, we can't force you. You're an adult. We're adults. We would hope that you put the priority on us and understand the project and initiatives that we're going for. One of our stars has said he will go all in 100% for us already. And I'll tell Ben who that is later. But I mean, there are a couple players who showed up last night who I know they play in other leagues, and we're going to have that conversation with them and say, listen, I would want you to be 100% ready to go at kickoff on a Sunday. I don't want you to play at 75%. And I know Ben will demand more, not just your physical, but where your mental state is at in terms of your approach to the game. It's these things that make amateur football very interesting in the US. It's very free flowing, and that can be both a good and a bad thing. I played amateur football in Germany being the home of bureaucracy. There was a contract I had to sign, and there was a lot of stipulations, and that's codified by law. Here, that doesn't exist, but it certainly is the kind of approach that we're trying to bring. And I think yesterday, and just in conversations with some other folks who are going to come through on the next tryout, they recognize that that's different. And that is an approach that I truly believe is going to result in success, longevity for the club as a whole.
Great stuff. One subject I want to touch on, be as short as long as you want, which I mentioned to all the teams from the States, is promotion and relegation, and your thoughts on the lack of it. Well, it will be the lack of it rather than the progression from bottom through to the top.
Nick, you want to attack that first?
Yeah, I'll try to not make it sound like just a rant here. Ask any football fan here, and they'll tell you it's frustrating. And I consider myself a very rational individual, and I can understand why the franchise system just won't allow for it. It's a hard sell to a non-sporting business owner who owns a sports franchise in the US to tell them, despite the millions of dollars that you put into a club, there's a chance that next year you will not receive the same TV money, you will not receive the same competition winnings, and some of your star players, which are a major part of your marketing spiel, will be playing in what is seen as a lesser league, which is what it is. It's also a hard sell to tell a team that's just barely keeping afloat that congratulations, you made it to the first division. You now have to plan in your account. You have to tell your accountants that they have to somehow incorporate a flight across the continent 12 times a year. In Germany, some teams just straight up don't do that. They come first. They're in, the fourth division, and they're honest. It's like, listen, we cannot afford that. We're going to stay right here. And they're lucky enough that their fans go, we totally get it. We'd rather a team live than become bankrupt after one season in a division above. That's Germany. There's a lot of protections there. Here, it's frustrating because there are what is essentially second division US clubs that could feasibly compete both financially and on the field at a higher division. But you have a board of the Major League Soccer who picks and chooses. Then the most frustrating part of it is the local aspect, which is, let's take Baltimore as an example. Baltimore lies in between, right in the center between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. Both have a first division professional team. And the MLS has stated very clearly that the owners of these two teams do not want a third professional team in Baltimore for fear of losing audiences, which is a ridiculous statement because be a better club then. You know what I mean? I mean, Philadelphia is a humongous city. If you're worried about tiny Baltimore fans deciding that they're going to drive 1.5 hours to Philadelphia to watch a game, that's just not going to happen. But these are statements and decisions and perspectives made by people who just don't understand fan culture that I think the three of us do. So you can understand a little bit of the worries that smaller clubs might have that have smaller budgets. But that aside, the promotion and relegation system, the pyramid system, is kind of a joke. And earlier we asked sort of what this team is, a fifth division team. We'd be or fifth, 5, maybe 6, depending on your perspective. That's sort of a sixth division team in Europe has a lot more clout. It has a lot more, responsibilities and expectations. And that's the kind of level that we're operating at, like mentally speaking. But no, we're going to be going against some clubs that think the same, and they're advancing very well. Columbia FC is one of them. And then we're going to be in our same division playing against some guys who the manager does the entire thing in a group text. And we're trying to leave that behind.
I mean, I don't know if same for Ben here, but I find it very frustrating. I spoke to some Scottish teams as well where you can actually win the league but not get promoted and get beaten a playoff from the team in the league above, which I think is totally wrong. Anyway, for me, I mean, I've never played at the level you guys have probably played at, but if I couldn't progress further as a player or with the team, I would find it difficult. And then if you can't get relegated, you think, well, are those teams actually trying near the end of the season? Or, there's nothing for them to fight for in my eyes anyway. That's the way I look at it.
Well, I wonder what Ben thinks about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the way that Nick has described it there is very eloquent on the off the field practices. In terms of the administrative and the financial situation, I completely agree with everything that Nick has said there. I would say it's bizarre. That's probably the best way of describing it. But I think when you look at true, like we talk about player development all the time, right? Or I talk a lot about player development and how do you develop players. I think one thing that is missed a lot over here is indirect player development. So how you leverage the best playing against the best, right? And obviously saying that, you allude to then promotion and relegation. I mean, that's the easiest one. If you are fighting for something every week to either stay up, so not go down, or to win the league, the incentives for you is going to be 10 times, right? That is just the reality. But when you look at, let's say over here with it, we'll use the top example, which is the MLS example. The MLS teams will play in the CONCACAF Champions League. And I think you saw Austin the other day. And they've gone and lost. They lost 3-0 to, I believe it was a team from Haiti. And everyone goes, oh, well, they played the second team against them. But that's not the point, is it? The point is that there is no pressure for them because they don't have to compete. They don't have to, compete on a level where they're fighting for their place in the team or they're fighting to stay up. So naturally, that kind of indirect development is just occurring all over because it's, everything is decentralized to organizations or franchises. This is ultimately the result of it. And, people often say, and they complain, the US doesn't produce X, Y, and Z with the population. I mean, to me, it's an opinion because I have not done enough, I'd say, science-backed work to define it. But I think it's a very obvious answer when you look at why the progression of, football in the US has not been set alight and gone on and blazing. It's not competitive to the level of what it is across the rest of the world because of I think a lack of pressure. That's probably my biggest description of it on a level of performance and development.
I think the sport in the US is stymied by two things. For the longest time, it's having to compete globally until the World Cup comes around against countries in the Caribbean, Central America, and Canada, and would inevitably lose against Mexico, but still would make it to the World Cup. As a bandwagon US fan, I would hope, and it sounds like this is what's going to happen, is that the US is going to try and make taking part in South American qualifiers an idea for the future. Because then you learn by failing and you adapt. If the US is trounced by Bolivia or Venezuela and is destroyed by Brazil here in Los Angeles or something like that, then you will start to see heads rolling. Then you'll start to see real change happening across the entire development aspect of US soccer, which is currently still, I'm sure one of the other people you've interviewed has mentioned, pay to play. And it's frustrating to break away from it. But in terms of the youth development, that's where things are. Bit by bit, things are changing. But it's where the US is behind the curve when it comes to the variety of ways that you can improve youth development while also setting yourself standards. Domestically, it's what I mentioned before. It's a matter of decisions being made by, the bottom dollar, essentially.
All right, well, I'll move on from the promotion relegation. That was excellent. But I get the same theme from every team I speak to from the States. A couple of last things. One of the first things you mentioned early on was we talked about was facilities. I just want you to tell a little bit more about the facilities where you play your games at, or where you're going to play your games at.
We are going to be having our first home games at a place called Latrobe Field, which is located in a very old neighborhood of Baltimore called Locust Point. A lot of teams have called it home in the past, both professional, semi-professional, and a lot of amateur teams as well. Freddie Adu holds a coaching course there once in a while. just as a name drop for Baltimore soccer royalty. But it's well known as being sort of a historic home for the sport in the city. That's where we're going to call home. We're very excited to play there. It's located in a little bit of a park, but around the park, there's a lot of residences. There's a lot of restaurants and bars. It's fairly central, which is very important for, how I want to direct the team's image. Away days will be here and there in Maryland, but not too far away.
I was going to say that traveling, obviously in the UK it's not an issue, but in your states, some of the states are bigger than the UK, so the traveling could be quite distance. What's your furthest travel going to be for an away game, would you say?
No more than half an hour.
That's good.
Some of our players are going to be driving in from farther away, but from my house to our furthest away day, it's half an hour.
And I had a quick look at the temperatures for the year, believe it or not, before, because I was trying to see how hot it gets where you are. And I'm guessing from April onwards, the temperatures, do you play your games in the afternoons or they played on evenings? I don't know if the temperature's an issue.
It gets pretty toasty, but what Maryland suffers from most in the summer is a level of humidity that makes you question your sanity. I will walk outside of my house in August to take the trash out, and it's like I've stepped in a bowl of soup. It's pretty bad. Ben, you're down in Virginia. I think it's worse there, but Maryland is a very humid place. That's going to be always a concern for anybody who's doing sports in the summer in this state.
And what's your hope for local supporters and fans to get people interested in coming along and watching the games?
I'm very optimistic. I think this is a sportsman city, but it's also a city that has been burned before by a variety of different attempts. Not necessarily burned, but has supported a football team in the past and has just been told one morning, hey, this team doesn't exist anymore. It's hard to do that. That will, over time, if you're just a football fan from a city, that will affect you. So what we're seeing is when we were talking with people is a little bit of skepticism, say, so you're doing this again. And then there's a conversation like, well, actually, we're doing things a little differently. We've brought in a lot of research. We've brought in a lot of conversations with people who are involved with past clubs in the area to learn what worked, what didn't work. I have every reason to be optimistic that we're going to have some fans at the game. We're trying to make it very approachable for all types of people, both hardcore fans of the sport and people who just want to come out on a nice spring evening and see the team represented against some others. We're working on a fan package, and in the distance, we are looking again to move into this, what would be essentially a small little stadium to call our own as opposed to a shared facility.
Great stuff. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, so I thought you were going to speak there, Ben.
I was to reiterate kind of what Nick was saying there. I think that again, you got to give Nick a lot of kudos for this because he's meticulously planned and detailed and thought out. The not only the pros of this, but the potential pitfalls that unfortunately I think others and other organisations have done before. So I think with the structure, the league we're in, what we're offering on a level for the community, I'm very, very excited by it. I think it's sustainable and it's something that can just keep growing. And to the next point, we've not gone, let's say, full send into the deep end. We've done it, and Nick's done it in a way that's going to allow us to grow and progressively get better and hopefully bigger. But yeah, I'm very excited by the infrastructure that we have to obviously put on a performance for the people of Baltimore. And
part of that performance is, of course, quality and local quality. And to attract local quality here, you must have a good local system. You must have a good local infrastructure. And Ben is a wizard when it comes to identifying good talent. We really do believe we're going to be able to field players every Sunday that are going to achieve a result. And that alone is going to be 50% of the effort, 50% of the result. What part of the image for Baltimore City is, of course, making it fiercely Baltimore, which is palpable. You got to have local music in what you're playing. You must have local icons. You must have local players when you can. Our players are going to be expected to be at local businesses that support us. And sometimes they're going to take some time out and help with a local organization, some charity, things like that. These are the kind of things that just weren't done before. And those are the things that can really make more people attend your games every Sunday. And when they attend your game on Sunday, they'll talk about it at work the day after.
Well, it's been wonderful speaking to you guys, especially at the beginning of the journey. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And I would love to get you back on mid-season or later in the season and see how things are progressing.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we'd love to do it, Steve. It'll be very exciting, and now there's an additional bit of pressure for us to be able to deliver, so we can come on all smiles and full of enthusiasm and joy. So absolutely,
no problem.
Exactly.
No problem at all. Well, thank you very much.